Hi, good afternoon, everyone. What a wonderful day to be talking about the meadowlarks. So today we're going to travel over to the Great Plains Nature Center and we're going to talk about the Melodious Meadowlarks with Emily Davis, who is out there right now. I'm going to give it on over to Emily. Emily, take it over.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you guys today to just celebrate Kansas Day and to celebrate our state bird, the Western Meadowlark. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. And like Carrie said, we're talking about our Melodious Meadowlarks. Melodious just has to do with melody. So the way that they make songs, and they make very beautiful music with all of their calls. And we'll get to hear some of what they sound like and just talk all about these guys and just what makes them so special to our state, Kansas. So just celebrating Kansas Day in that way. So whether you are here with us virtually, just make sure that if you have any questions that you can put them in the chat. So feel free throughout this whole entire program to ask questions or make comments, and then Carrie will share those with me and I can answer you guys' questions. But we'll be learning a lot about these guys and whether these meadowlarks are just low on the ground or they're singing up high in the sky. There really is a lot to learn and love about these melodious meadowlarks. So let's just start exploring this really amazing bird, and definitely use the chat if you have any questions. So let's start out first off by making some observations with these beautiful meadowlarks. And now an observation, all that is when you look really, really closely at something to learn more about it. So using your eyes to look really closely at something. Observations are something that scientists do all the time to be able to learn about our natural world. So I want you guys to be looking at these two pictures that you're seeing on the screen of these meadowlarks. And I want you to
Emily,
tell, oh yeah.
it didn't transfer over. It didn't go to the next slide for some reason.
No, that's so weird. Let's try this again. I'll stop sharing and then start sharing again, and we'll see if it'll change over to the correct one. There's that share button. Here we
Don't
go.
forget the computer sound.
Yes. Okay, can you guys see those two pictures of the birds now?
Yes, we got it now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So be making some observations. So look closely at those two pictures and put in the chat some things that you notice about these birds. So that could be, what colors are these birds? How big are their eyes? Look at their beak, look at their legs, look at all of their feathers, and just write in some of your observations, some of the things that you notice with your eyes using your sense of sight to be able to tell. And let's see what we can learn some more about these guys as you guys are making observations about them. Again, looking at their colors, the shape of their beak, shape of their feet, their body, all that kind of stuff.
One seems to be a little bit brighter than the other one. The one in the top corner over there. I take it, is
it's
that
definitely a brighter picture.
Is that a different type of meadowlark?
Both of these are Western meadowlarks.
They're both the same. Okay. Oh, okay, I see.
Just want to see what you guys kind of notice about them, because it's a really good way to start learning, is by just making these observations. I know for me, I noticed that their eyes are pretty tiny. They don't take up a big part of their head. They're really, really small, and there's all sorts of different colors that are covering their body too. You have any ideas in the chat?
Looks like, let's see here. Someone said the left one has more white on it. There's consistent, they're yellow, black, white, and brown.
Yeah.
I think I might take a stab at this one. Is this a male and a female?
I'm not really sure, actually. They both pretty much look a lot the same. But just
Oh,
with birds, um, a lot of birds, they just have little slight variations or changes in color, just per individual. So just like how humans, even though we're all humans, we all look a little bit different. It can be the same with birds too, even if they are the same species or they're both male or female, whatever it is. But yeah, that's a really good observation, though. You notice there's a little bit more white on one of them. So that's really interesting. And you guys also noticed a lot of the different colors. So you can see black and you can see yellow. There's some brown and some white. So those are all really, really good observations that y'all are making. So we'll go ahead and go on to our next slide. Did that change over?
yep. Oh, yes, it did. Now I see the big
Perfect.
difference.
So those were
Big
really,
difference.
really good observations. Now, in those other pictures, we saw the front of meadowlarks, and they are really, really easy to spot and see the difference between them and other birds if you just see that front. So meadowlarks, they have really, really bright yellow on their chest, and you can see some of it on their face as well, and a little bit above their eyes. But there's also that really big black mark that you can see on their chest too, inside of all that yellow. So that nice black V is another really easy way to tell that this is a meadowlark. That's something that really only they have, at least in the state of Kansas. You may have also noticed that their beaks are really, really long and pointy. They're very, very skinny, and it almost looks like it's even longer than their face. So you can see that really, really long, skinny beak. And later we'll talk about why it's so long and skinny. You can also see on the back of the meadowlark, there's a lot of different colors that you don't really see as much on the front. So you don't see as much of the yellow, but you see lots of brown and tan and white and black that's kind of spotted all over their back. And so it offers really good camouflage. It can help them blend in with their surroundings. You may also see their little feet. You can see on that left picture, its little feet are perching on that little branch. And they're really long and skinny, and they actually have 4 toes. So, we have 5 toes, but they only have 1, 2, 3, 4 on each feet. And they have 4 kind of long claws on each of their toes, too. But they're really, really pretty birds, especially when you can see all of that bright yellow. And I think Carrie was kind of getting at this earlier, there are actually 2 kinds of meadowlarks that we have here in Kansas. So the Western meadowlark is the one that is our state bird, but there is also an Eastern meadowlark that you can find in Kansas. And here they are side by side. So these are actually the 2 different species, the Eastern and the Western meadowlark, but it is really hard to tell them apart. They almost look identical. There's just a couple of things that help you to tell them apart. So I'm curious if anyone has any guesses on which one they think is the Eastern or the Western. So you might think number 1 is the Eastern, or maybe you think it's the Western, and the same with number 2. So if anybody has any guesses, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll reveal the answer here in just a second. But I will give you a hint. One of the easiest ways to tell them apart does have to do with their face. Their face on each one looks a little bit different. And I actually just learned this yesterday because I had no idea that there was a way to tell them apart. But there is like 1 or 2 little things that can kind of help you tell them apart. Do you
Wow,
have any guesses?
not yet, but just by looking at them, I'm like, I could not tell you which one was Eastern and which one was Western at all.
It's really, really difficult, really hard. And here in a second, too, we'll kind of learn about some of their songs because their songs are a really good way to tell them apart. They do sound different, but just by looking at them, especially if you're just out in nature, it would be really hard to tell them apart, especially since they move around a bunch and they just fly all over the place. If we don't
Well,
have any guesses yet, we might just go ahead and reveal the answers.
so they're saying, let me see.
Ooh, yeah.
Let me see here. Number 1 is Western, is the
Okay.
guess.
Sweet. Yeah, and it is really, really hard to tell these guys apart. But in this case, number one is
Oh,
actually the Eastern Meadowlark, and number two is the Western Meadowlark. And I'm going to show you guys kind of the way that you can tell them apart. So if you look at their heads, you'll see that nice little stripe that comes out of their eye. So you can see that really black stripe that comes out of their eye. On the Eastern Meadowlark, it is really bold and bright. It almost looks like someone put a Sharpie there and just marked by their eye. But on the Western Meadowlark, it's not near as dark and bright. It's kind of more dusty looking and looks a little bit browner. So that's one of the easiest ways to tell them apart because they really do look so much alike. But that's what I think is the easiest way to tell them apart. But what it could be even easier is by just listening to their songs. They actually do have different songs. And to me, I am not the biggest bird person in the world, although I love them very much. So listening to their song is kind of hard for me, but for a lot of people, that's what works way better than just looking at them. So we're going to listen to a couple of their songs real quick. So first, we're going to listen to Eastern Meadowlark. So that was the Eastern Meadowlark goes beep, beep, boop, beady doo. And it's just kind of simple and it's very, very pretty. All of the Meadowlarks have really pretty songs. But now let's listen to the Western Meadowlark. So that was what the Western Meadowlark sounds like. And it sounds like a little bit crazier than the Eastern Meadowlark. And it's definitely a little bit longer too. And so that's the easiest way that most people find to be able to tell those two birds apart. Because again, just by looking at them, it is really, really hard to tell. So people will often learn bird calls because since birds are moving around a lot all over the place or they're hiding, instead, they'll listen to them because usually birds are making lots of noises. And so if they hear them, they can know exactly what kind of bird it is. So you guys can learn bird calls just like the two that we listened to today. And that can help you know what kind of birds are around you, either in your backyard or at a park that you might be visiting. So they're really, really pretty to listen to, though. So these Western meadowlarks live all over Kansas. You can find them all over the state, and they stay here year round. So some birds will fly away or migrate whenever it gets too hot or too cold outside, but these guys love to stay in our states all the time. And so they stay here because they have habitats in Kansas. And so in a second, I'm going to tell you more about what a habitat is, but I want you guys to be thinking about what kind of habitat you think they like to live in. So a habitat is a place where an animal or a plant lives and they can find food in that habitat. So a habitat is an animal's home. So think about where you think a meadowlark likes to live. Some options might be maybe around a lake where there's lots of water, so like a lake or a pond. They might like to live there. Or maybe you think that they like a prairie habitat where there's lots and lots of grasses and flowers and wide open spaces. Or maybe you think they like to live in a forest habitat that has lots of trees all over the place. So think about which one you think is a favorite habitat of the Western meadowlark. And we have them all over Kansas. So we have to have some places that they really, really like to live. So think about what we have a lot of in Kansas.
this is going to be a tough one.
I know. We have so many really good habitats that we have in Kansas. And there is a little bit of hint in the name of the bird, so the meadowlark. So that's a nice little hint for you. Look at the pictures and think about which one you think is the habitat for our state bird.
Which one do you see more in Kansas from the three pictures here?
We don't have any guesses yet. I might go ahead and reveal the answer.
So they're just kind of all over the place a little bit. Let me see.
Yeah.
I've got Miss Circle's class said the prairie,
Okay.
and I've got another one, prairie. I've got one that says forest and one that says lake and another prairie. So
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome. So quite a few of you guys got it right. It
yep.
is the
And they're coming in. Yep.
prairie. Yeah, there we go. So the prairie is a favorite of the meadowlark. Meadow is another word for a prairie or a grassland where there is just lots of tall grasses everywhere and lots of wildflowers and shrubs. And so these prairies have really wide open spaces where you can usually see really, really far into the distance, just like you can in this picture. And that's what a lot of Kansas has. We have a ton of prairies, and that's what makes up most of our state. So this is a favorite place for the Western meadowlark to be able to hang out. Now, prairies are a favorite because it has a lot of food for these meadowlarks to be able to eat. So this meadowlark is on the ground looking around for food. So I want you guys to think about what kind of food might this meadowlark be looking for on the ground. I'm sure there's lots and lots of options. Even just in the picture, you can see grass. So you might think that the meadowlark might like to eat grass, but there's lots of other stuff that hangs out in the grass as well. So it might be something like that that it likes to eat in the prairie. And so here's another picture that may give you a hint and help you kind of figure out what these guys like to eat if you can see what is in the meadowlark's mouth. And so its kind of favorite thing to be able to eat out in the prairie, which you can find all over the place, is actually bugs. Their favorite thing to eat is bugs, insects, creepy crawlies, whatever you want to call them. So they'll eat things like beetles and grasshoppers, crickets, ants, spiders, and more. And so they have that kind of tweezer-like beak. So I'll go back to this other picture. So you can
I was
see
about to
their
say
beak.
that
Yeah.
that almost looks like a little wing off of his beak that he's got, an
Yeah.
insect with a wing.
Exactly. Yeah. So back in his beak, that was like a little grasshopper or katydid. And so that's probably what he was snacking on right there. But looking at that beak, earlier we talked about how skinny and pointy it is. It kind of like looks like tweezers. If you guys have tweezers at home that are really pointy and they're good at grabbing things. And so these little tweezer-like beaks are perfect for grabbing all of these bugs and creepy crawlies so that they can easily pluck them off the ground or off of leaves. So they are made to be able to eat all of these bugs. But sometimes whenever it gets colder outside, kind of like it is during the winter, there is a lot of less bugs around. And so they will also eat seeds from plants like grasses, like you can see in this picture. That is little blue stem, which is all over our prairies, and it's actually our state grass. But they have lots of seeds that meadowlarks love to be able to eat too. So those are kind of their two main food sources are lots and lots of bugs, and then also seeds from plants. Now we're going to look at some of their nests that they have. Meadowlark nests are really, really cool, and it is not what is in these pictures. So most birds, they build nests to hold their eggs and to hold their babies and to keep them safe. And so they'll make them out of sticks and leaves and more, just like you can see in these pictures. And most birds, like these guys, make their nests really high up in the trees and high up in the sky to be able to protect their babies, because there's not a lot of stuff that's able to get up in those trees. But meadowlarks don't do this. Meadowlarks do not put their nests high up in the trees. So instead, they are actually going to put them on the ground, because if you look at these pictures, and again, they love to live in the prairies or the meadows. Do you see any trees in these meadows or these prairies? Do you see any high places that they might be able to build a nest on? No, not really. It's really flat and it's mainly just all of the grass that's on the ground. So they don't build their nests up in trees because out in the prairie, there's really not a lot of trees. So they have learned to build their nests on the ground in the grass. So what you're seeing in this picture here, and you're going to see a little circle pop up, that white circle is actually where a nest of a meadowlark can be found, is hiding underneath all of those grasses that they've actually placed there to hide their nests. So it's really, really cool that they actually build their nests on the ground. And there's a lot of other prairie birds that will do this too. So their nest is completely on the ground and they'll surround their eggs with lots of grasses. So maybe you guys can see in all of that grass, you can see a few eggs that are actually hiding in all of that grass. And that helps to hide them from predators, things that might like to eat their eggs, because there are lots of critters out there that actually like to eat eggs. So you can see in these pictures, their eggs are white and they're pretty small. They're only about an inch long. So very, very tiny little eggs. And they have lots of brown spots on them that helps them to be able to blend in with a lot of the brown and kind of whitish yellow grasses that are around them. And usually they'll have 5 or 6 eggs each at a time that they'll lay in their nest. So really not a lot of eggs that they're taking care of, but they can have them a couple of times a year. Now you might be looking at these pictures and you may notice that these eggs do not look like a Western meadowlark, right? They look so different from their parents. So let's look a little bit like what they look like whenever they start to grow up. So here is what a baby meadowlark looks like when it hatches. They look like that. They look kind of crazy. They still don't really look like a Western meadowlark like we saw in all of those pictures. They're kind of wrinkly and fuzzy looking, and they don't have a ton of feathers like they do when they grow up, and really don't have any of the same colors. So you guys earlier noticed that they have lots of yellow and black and white and brown on them, but you can't really see any of those colors in this picture. But what you can see is that meadowlark has its mouth wide open and it is waiting for food. So its parents are taking care of it and bringing it back food as it is hanging out in the nest and staying safe from predators. But once they start to grow up, they will eventually look a lot more like their parents. But their colors aren't quite as bright yet. So this is a juvenile or a young meadowlark. You can see it looks a lot more like it. You see some of the yellow, some of the brown, and the white, but their chest isn't as bright as those other pictures that we saw. And can you guys see a black V? No, not really. They don't really have the black V yet. But the older they get, and when they become an adult, they will have that nice black V on their chest as well and be a lot brighter yellow. And then eventually they'll start to look like their parents again. So
Wow,
do we
what a
have any
great,
questions so far?
I was just thinking, what a great camouflage that is for those,
Right.
for the baby birds so that they don't get picked off by, if there were predators on the prairie. But they just kind of blend in with the
Mhm.
grass, with the coloring.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so we do have a question. How long do meadowlarks typically live?
Oh, typically they live, I believe it's less than 10 years, so not a crazy long time. This is not a very big bird. If you've ever seen a robin before, they're about the same size as a robin. So they do get eaten by lots of other things like bigger birds like hawks and stuff. And so usually that kind of limits how long they live. But yeah, not a super long time out in the wild, but they're still really, really cool creatures out there. Great
So,
question.
so a predator to a meadowlark would be like a hawk?
Hmm. Yeah, hawks or
Wow.
owls, bigger birds like that will eat other birds, which is kind of crazy.
That is. I guess I never even thought about that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, hawks and owls are really, really good at hunting other birds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see here. We answered the predator. Are there
Mhm.
any other predators maybe that besides a hawk and owls?
Yeah, so some mammals will also be predators. So think things like coyotes or even raccoons, especially whenever these guys are asleep at night, since they do nest on the ground. Potentially a coyote or a raccoon would be able to eat them as well. So those are kind of the main ones. Sometimes snakes as well, especially with the babies and the eggs. Snakes will be a predator of these guys too. All
Okay,
right.
we've just got a couple more minutes. So if you guys got
Mhm.
any questions, please put them in the chat for us so that we can get those questions answered about the little meadowlarks here. Now, remember,
Yeah.
guys, this is Kansas Day, so this is our state bird. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. See,
Yeah.
okay.
So, like Carrie said, this is our Kansas state bird. And these beautiful singers have been our state bird for a really long time. So, in 1925, which was almost 100 years ago, that's a really long time ago, the Kansas Audubon Society did a statewide election to choose the state bird. And nearly 125,000 students chose the Western Meadowlark for the state bird. And in 1937, almost over 10 years later, it became the official state bird symbol for our state. So these guys are really, really cool and have represented Kansas for a crazy long time. And now, as we're almost out of time, I do want to show you guys a quick little video just to learn a little bit more about these guys and kind of how they're doing in our state and what we can do to help them. So it's an icon of the American West, the Western Meadowlark, the state bird of Kansas, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oregon, and Wyoming. But a recent study shows that grassland birds are in trouble. So more than 700 million grassland birds have vanished since 1970. So a lot of these birds are kind of struggling in their habitats in these prairies that we have in Kansas and all over the United States. But there are some ways that you can help out our state bird and other grassland birds. So a really big one is planting native grasses and flowers. So if you guys have a garden at maybe your school or at home, using grasses and flowers that are originally found in Kansas and that the meadowlarks love to eat is a really great way to help them out. Another big one that people don't usually think about is cats. Keeping your cats inside is a really easy way to help out our state bird. Cats actually eat a ton of birds, especially birds that live on the ground. So keeping your cats inside is a great way to help them out too. Another way is using less plastic. So reduce, reuse, and recycle. If we have less trash that's polluting our habitats or hurting our habitats, that also makes it healthier for these Western meadowlarks. And lastly, just go outside and enjoy watching birds. Learning more about them and viewing them in their native habitats is a great way to just help out our state bird. And if you notice some really cool things about them, you can tell scientists about it, and that helps them learn how to better take care of these state birds. So if you want to be able to see these meadowlarks, go outside and look in wide open spaces, look in those prairies and see if you can listen to them. Listen very closely for those calls that we heard earlier. and look on the ground and look up in the sky, even look on fence posts. There's all sorts of places that you can find these really cool birds. And so hopefully you guys will be able to go out into nature and see if you can find any of these Western meadowlarks. So do we have any last questions as we finish up our time?
I think we are good on questions, but I just wanted to say too that anybody's welcome to go out to Great Plains Nature Center, correct? And just kind of explore all the different creatures that you have out there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have exhibits where you can come inside and you can learn more about these critters, but we sit on a really big park where you can just go outside and that is open from sunrise to sunset and you can just go and see if you can find any of these critters out in our park.
And it's completely free.
Completely free. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Emily, on your expertise of our state bird, the meadowlark. I hope everyone got to learn a little bit more about the state bird as we continue to celebrate Kansas Day. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.